teased for being poor in a jewelry store, but the shocking truth about his wealth was revealed. The bell jingled as Ethan and his mother entered the luxurious jewelry store, a world of glistening diamonds and gold that felt light years away from their modest Midwestern life. He shifted uncomfortably, the cold air biting at his skin, while Rachel glanced at the extravagant items that sparkled under the fluorescent lights. Ethan felt the eyes of the employees bore into him, judging him, knowing he didn't belong. His fists clenched involuntarily, a mix of humiliation and resolve swelling within him. He wasn't about to let their disdain for his poverty define him. "Let us just look," Rachel murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan met her gaze, searching for reassurance. He wanted to tell her that it didn't matter, that there were bigger dreams out there, but the shimmering displays made everything seem so mundane. Their struggles laid bare before this affluent world. "Maybe I'll get you something nice," he offered, hoping to lift the weight off her shoulders. But his own words rang hollow against the backdrop of stunning rings and glittering necklaces, treasures they never afford. As they walked past a diamond-encrusted display, a sneer from an employee crystallized his fears. "They're just here to window shop," he overheard, the words stinging like ice in his veins. Ethan straightened, refusing to show the hurt. He could feel rage simmering beneath the surface, battling with a bitter sense of inadequacy. Was this his future? To forever be defined by the hollowness of what he could not have. Back at school, the loneliness often engulfed him, but he buried those feelings in late-night study sessions, trying to create a life beyond the brittle confines of their finances. It was a tech competition when that sparked a light. A retired professor praised his scientific acumen and urged him toward scholarships. Suddenly, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. The very idea of breaking through barriers lit a fire within him. But as he delved into his studies, he stumbled across that dusty box left behind by his grandfather, filled with old family documents. Reading them felt like unearthing a secret past. He discovered he was a descendant of a once prominent inventor whose dreams revolutionized science, only to learn about a hidden trust fund waiting for him on his 18th birthday. The thought struck him like lightning. Could this be the key to escape the cycles of failure that seemed to bind his family? As excitement mingled with anxiety, Ethan felt the familiar remnants of his earlier humiliation creep back in. This opportunity could change everything, but could he truly break free from the chains of expectation and judgment? In defiance, he decided to revisit the jewelry store. If he could make them listen, make them see his potential beyond the judgments they placed on him, it would be a step closer to claiming his future. He pushed through the opulent doors once more, clutching his inventions and the fruits of his late-night perseverance. The confidence radiated off him, yet anxiety knotted tightly in his stomach. The once dismissive employees seemed taken aback, their brows furrowed in confusion. Ethan felt the room shift, felt eyes on him like never before, not in disdain but curiosity. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." As he presented his ideas passionately, the tension in the air thickened. Everything he had fought for hung precariously in the balance. Just as he thought he was breaking through, a familiar face emerged from the crowd, a cousin he thought he'd lost to the shadows of the past. Someone who held pieces of the family puzzle that could shatter his newly envisioned future. Panic surged within him. Could he truly escape the past, or was he destined to confront it once more? The gravity of their history loomed, amplifying the silent question that echoed in his mind. Would he ultimately control his destiny or be dragged back into a life of despair? Ethan's heart raced as his cousin stepped forward through the crowded store, a wave of memories crashing against his resolve. Once, they had been inseparable, but time had frayed their bond, pulling them apart into different versions of life. How had things diverged so drastically? He felt the crowd surge around him, their energy almost suffocating. but his focus narrowed to the familiar face that held both comfort and chaos. "This is quite the change for you," his cousin remarked, sarcasm dripping from the words like honey laden with bitterness. Ethan sensed the layers of unspoken tension, a testament to their shared history, the poverty they had washed over in laughter and shared dreams. But underneath lay resentment, a mirror to his own challenges. He swallowed hard, determined not to falter. "I'm here to show people that I am more than what they think." The cousin raised an eyebrow, skepticism mingling with intrigue. "And you think they'll just listen? Look around." The condescension in his tone was a reminder of their childhood conversations, the dreams that had evaporated like vapor in the morning air. Ethan took a deep breath, channeling the confidence he had built in his late-night sessions, filled with science and invention, into this moment. "They will listen because I have something important to share," he said, pointing to the prototypes in his backpack. He unzipped it slowly, revealing the delicate devices he had toiled over, notes tucked within the compartments. Each piece wasn't just a reflection of his late nights. They were fragments of the capabilities he had discovered within himself. This was more than a mere presentation, it was a declaration of self-worth, unbound by judgment. His cousin's expression shifted, the skepticism ebbing slightly, as curiosity sparked. "You seriously think you can change their minds and yours?" "Yes," Ethan replied. Simultaneously, doubt coiled within him, battling with the newfound determination ignited from within. Did he believe in his ability to change the narrative, to break free from years of being marginalized? The memory of his family's embarrassment, their dismal financial conversations echoed in his mind, but he pushed forward. "I don't just want to show them my inventions. I want them to see who I am." With that, he stepped forward, drawing the attention of the other customers and employees. "I am a descendant of an inventor," he declared, his voice steady, "and it's time for me to step out of the shadows." The employees exchanged glances, uncertainty swirling in the air, mingling with intrigue. Ethan felt the tension transform from an adversarial weight into something heavier yet exhilarating. He was stepping onto a platform he had built through countless failures and late nights. "Show us then," the cousin said, the challenge clear in his tone. "Prove to them that you've accomplished something worthwhile." Ethan's mind raced. He could feel the audience's eyes on him, a mix of disbelief and curiosity. Time seemed suspended as the anticipation thickened the air, but within him, a confidence surged. He made a decision right then, threading his fear and anger into a single statement. This was his moment to redefine everything. "All right, I will," he stated resolutely. Unfurling his blueprints, he prepared to share not just his inventions but the story of his struggle, his lineage, his dreams transformed into reality. However, as he began to explain the first prototype, a strange unease settled deep within him. Would they really understand the depth of his journey? Would his cousin support him or merely remind him of his roots? As he glanced at his cousin, a new doubt began to sprout in his mind. Could this person, once a source of laughter and dreams, now become a new rival in a world so unforgiving? The potential for disappointment hung like a storm cloud above him. And as he spoke, a single thought crept into his consciousness. The true test was yet to come. With the possibility of revelation looming, he wondered if this unveiling would lead to acceptance or closer ties once more, or if it would shatter the fragile hope he had built. Who am I really? A dreamer or just another fool caught in the threads of family expectations? Before he could delve deeper into his thoughts, an unexpected interruption diverted their attention, a high-stakes encounter with the store's management, seeking to determine whether they could allow someone of his background and history to wield influence in such an elite space. The moment threatened to derail everything. Ethan's mind raced, questioning how to navigate this sudden twist, forcing him to confront his deepest fears as the stakes escalated once again. What awaited him on the other side of this confrontation? The moment the store manager stepped into the fray, the energy shifted like a tide threatening to drown him in judgment and doubt. Ethan's heart pounded louder than the hum of the fluorescent lights, and the realization of the stakes loomed over him like a heavy storm cloud. This wasn't just about sharing his inventions. It was now a matter of proving his worth in a space that seemed determined to keep him out. "Excuse me," the manager interrupted, his voice clipped and authoritative. "What exactly is going on here?" His eyes scanned the curious crowd, then landed on Ethan, who felt a flush of heat rise to his cheeks. "Just showing my prototypes," Ethan managed, pushing back the suffocating grip of anxiety that threatened to steal his words. He felt exposed, like a piece of art on display in a gallery, waiting with bated breath for critics to shred him apart. The unease gnawed at him, but he clung to the threads of confidence he had woven for himself in the dark hours of exploration. The manager's brows knitted together, embodying skepticism that mirrored his cousin's. "And who gave you permission to showcase your inventions here? They don't exactly fit the theme," he spat, his disdain thinly veiled. Every gaze in the store sharpened into a piercing glare. Ethan's throat tightened. He felt smaller than the very inventions that lay before him, mechanical embodiments of his dreams, thrust into an unforgiving light. The audience that had once offered a flicker of interest now seemed to revel in this moment of vulnerability. But as the tide of doubt surged, something deeper stirred within him. It was a resolve and understanding that his road, riddled with despair and obstacles, was precisely what had led him here. Who were they to dictate his worth? "I believe I have something valuable to share, regardless of my name or background," he interjected, surprising himself with the confidence in his voice. The murmur of the crowd shifted. They could sense his defiance as he faced a figure symbolizing the barriers he had battled. There was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, as if they were barely beginning to reconsider their preconceived notions. The manager's eyes glinted with a mix of annoyance and intrigue. "You think just one little speech can change everything? How about you prove your capabilities rather than playing the victim?" Ethan's heart raced yet again, this time ignited by the challenge rather than fear. "Very well," he said, deliberately focusing on the prototypes instead of the faces around him. "Let me explain the first device." He reached for the nearest object, adrenaline sharpening his focus. The invention was elegant and crafted with purpose, a solar battery designed to circumvent the barriers put in place by socioeconomic status. This device converts solar energy more efficiently than traditional designs, making it accessible not just to the affluent, but to those who need it most. As he spoke, words flowed from him rhythmically, wrapping around his audience. Each term became a thread in the tapestry of his narrative, a narrative woven from late nights and raw ambition. He explained the versatility of the device, how it could revolutionize energy consumption for the underserved. The store manager crossed his arms, clearly unconvinced, but for the first time, Ethan saw a flicker of interest in some of the spectators' eyes. He pressed forward, excitement fueling his momentum as he unveiled the next prototype. "This isn't just about technology. It's about the people behind it. Individuals struggling to find their place. I am one of those people." But in the back of his mind, questions rattled like an unreliable machine. What if they dismissed his innovations, relegating them to the shadow of monetary prejudice? What if this moment turned into nothing more than a reminder of his insecurities? As he wrestled with these thoughts, he caught his cousin's gaze once more. The skepticism was still there, but a new hint of vulnerability mirrored his own. Could his cousin also be battling expectations from their past? The more Ethan laid bare his journey, the more he realized he might not be the only one reckoning with their identity. Just then, the weight of silence broke as murmurs and whispers spread through the crowd. Ethan knew this was the turning point. He could either fray further or stitch together the fabric of both their identities. But before he could speak again, the manager interrupted. "You still haven't answered my question. Why should we believe in you?" The question hung heavily, while Ethan could feel the collective breath of the crowd held in anticipation. They were no longer just spectators. They had become potential allies in his struggle. The moment had morphed into a brink of revelation not merely for Ethan, but for all who had moments where they felt like outsiders. Was he ready to step further out of his comfort zone, potentially connect with his cousin, and reach for the acceptance both craved? This confrontation could be the door to new understanding or a relentless wall he had to scale. As he paused to gather his thoughts, one burning question remained. How far was he willing to go to claim his place in this unforgiving world? Ethan felt the weight of the manager's question press against him like a physical force. Felt raw and unrelenting. Why should they believe in him? He looked out at the crowd, an amalgamation of disbelief and curiosity, and the echo of those words rang back in his mind like a drumbeat insistent, demanding an answer. The crowd's restlessness shifted into an expectant hum, and Ethan could feel his palms grow slick against the edges of his prototypes. This was a moment that demanded action, but simply providing a long-winded explanation wouldn't suffice. He needed to connect, to bridge the chasm of uncertainty he sensed from the audience, just as he had in his own life. "Let me show you," he finally replied, a flicker of clarity piercing through the fog of apprehension. He stepped back to give himself room to breathe and examine his surroundings with fresh eyes. The room, always bright yet stifling, felt simultaneously alien and intimately familiar, like the memories of a childhood space revisited with morphed perspectives. His first prototype represented more than mere technology. It mirrored his fight against the systemic issues he'd faced. "This is a challenge to the traditional system," he said, pointing at the solar battery. "It's about accessibility. Why should innovation be confined to wealth? Why can't it flourish everywhere? And that's exactly how I learned to invent, by looking at what wasn't available to me and finding ways to bridge that gap." He allowed the words to flow, each sentiment tinged with sincerity. The room quieted further as faces leaned in, participants now rather than spectators. In that moment, Ethan saw the need for authenticity, beyond just his inventions. He needed to demystify who he was, and maybe, just maybe, it would resonate with those who listened. As he spoke, there was an internal dialogue swirling around within him. His narrative was evolving, weaving all the unresolved threads of his youth into a tapestry rich with purpose. It wasn't just about solving problems. It was about relating and sharing the journey he took to confront obstacles that many silently faced. "Growing up in poverty, I learned to manipulate the scraps of opportunity around me. Uncertain yet hopeful," he continued. This was a shared human experience that could not be ignored. Illuminating the motivation behind his designs, he bared pieces of his vulnerabilities like armor stripped, inviting connection and understanding with each confession. "And when I make these inventions, I'm neither appealing to the privileged nor exalting myself above others. I am simply aiming to create a path for us all." Ethan's eyes darted toward his cousin again, a familiar sense of shared history encapsulated in the moment. It was foolish, of course, to bank on other people's realities intertwining with his own fears, but deep down, he felt they could bridge the alienation together. Could this connection be the catalyst for greater empathy in the room? With each passing second, the manager remained stoically neutral, arms crossed, but Ethan could see the uncertainty playing delicately across his face. This wasn't just about inventions, it was an examination of belief, of vision versus tradition, and of the expectations laid heavy on their shoulders. A flicker of recognition sparked in the crowd, not just from understanding the technology but sensing the larger narrative behind it. They were no longer just passive witnesses but participants, grappling with their own legacies, aspirations, and hesitations. Ethan pressed forward as possibility crept back into the space, buoying him with its heady promise. "I stand here today, not just as a creator, but as someone who believes we all deserve a fair chance. This is simply the beginning. If you're willing to listen, I'm ready to show you how these dreams can become tangible." The murmur shifted. Nods of curiosity began to ripple through the spectators. They drank in his words like a well-deserved respite, souls searching for truth in the lyrical rhythm of his struggle for validation. But then, just as the atmosphere thickened with possibilities, the manager's gaze narrowed, a simmering challenge bubbling beneath the surface. "Talk is cheap, Ethan. What's next? Are you prepared to deliver real results?" The question crackled in the air, and Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline course through him. He had ignited the flame, but the fire was far from contained. How could he transform this step into something that held weight, beyond just a fleeting moment? With that, A new notion began to take root. Was it time to showcase his next prototype in a demonstration? The stakes were now tangible and brimming with uncertainty, and he understood the reality of his journey was still unfolding. The true test lay not in his inventions but within his readiness to confront the trials ahead. With that burning thought consuming his mind, a new revelation crystallized. Was he prepared to step forward, not just as an inventor but as a leader in his own story? Ethan stood at the crossroads of doubt and determination, the weight of the manager's words pressing against him like an impending storm. He could feel the pulse of the audience, an echoing heartbeat that mirrored his own, a rhythm of anticipation intertwined with skepticism. In that moment, he recognized the urgency to move past rhetoric and into action. Would he let himself be defined by his fears or by the legacy he intended to create? He inhaled deeply, the crisp air filled with the scent of metal and innovation. It reminded him of late nights spent in the cluttered workshop of his youth, fashioning early prototypes from discarded materials, turning scarcity into opportunity. Each failed attempt had honed his resourcefulness, sharpening both his skills and resolve. Now, he could feel that same spirit igniting within him again. "What if I show you how it works?" Ethan suggested, his voice steadier than the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in his mind. The crowd leaned forward, their collective curiosity intensifying. He set his prototypes on the table, arranging them like pieces of a puzzle waiting for a solution. With each demonstration, he spoke with passion, layering technical explanation with personal anecdotes. The solar battery, the energy-efficient light source, each invention unfolded a story, a narrative of struggle turned triumph packed into a prototype. "Imagine a neighborhood like the one I grew up in," he explained as he linked wires. "Imagine what it would mean to have reliable energy, not just for the affluent but for everyone." Innovation doesn't lie exclusive to boardrooms. It thrives in real life, in every hand that desires it. The realization washed over the audience. This wasn't merely theoretical. This was viable, this was essential. Their faces shifted from uncertainty to a stir of excitement, and he could almost feel their thoughts align with his own vision. A flicker of realization sparked within him. As he finessed the mechanics of the prototype, he openly described his failures and how each misstep had led him to innovation. This was more than just a demonstration. It was his personal journey laid bare, a revelation that fueled their connection. The audience shifted, their skepticism sliding into a shared determination to discover what lay ahead. In the back of his mind, Ethan understood there was still a chasm to cross, the expectations held by the manager. Would he dismiss his dreams, or could he kindle faith in the potential of what he was creating? He needed to seize this momentum, and there was no time to hesitate. With a sudden burst of confidence, Ethan stepped boldly towards the manager, who had yet to let his guard down. "I understand that results matter. Would be willing to put this to the test? A live demonstration right here, right now?" He felt the charged atmosphere tingle against his skin. The manager's silence was like the pause before a wave crashes, heavy and thick with possibility. Ethan's heart raced. What if he failed? But what if he succeeded? In that moment, Ethan made a silent promise to himself. No longer would he let abandonment or fear dictate his choices. He would step bravely into this role, embracing vulnerability as strength. By inviting the challenge head-on, he would assert not just his capabilities as an inventor but also his worth as a leader of this narrative. Determined, he stood there ready, awaiting the manager's response, a vessel of ambition and grit. Then, just as the room seemed to hold its breath, the manager leaned forward, his expression inscrutable. "Very well, you want to show me results? Prove it. Prove that what you have can stand against scrutiny and deliver what you promise." The tension thickened, and an electric thrill coursed through Ethan. Was this the moment he had been waiting for, a chance to prove that his past did not define him, nor did it determine his future? With newfound resolve flooding his veins, he thought of the many hurdles ahead. It was time to rise and lead, not just with invention, but with the unwavering spirit he had cultivated through hardship. But would he be ready for the unforeseen challenges that awaited him? Ethan's breath hitched as the manager's challenge echoed in his ears, each syllable a countdown to a moment that could change everything. Focus pushed aside the swirling uncertainty, sharpening his senses. He needed a plan, and he needed it fast. "Let us set this up," Ethan said, motioning toward the available workbench. The cluttered assortment of materials no longer intimidated him. They represented possibilities waiting to be unlocked. He could hear the soft shuffle of feet as the audience leaned in closer, their eyes glimmering with a mix of skepticism and hope. He quickly laid out the components of his solar battery, his fingers dancing over each piece as he arranged them methodically. This was not just about demonstrating a product. It was an opportunity to weave his story into every step of the process. The whispers of failure lingered at the edge of his mind, but he pushed them aside. "Every design begins with a vision," he declared as he began connecting wires. "When I was younger, our family's struggle with energy access inspired me. We used candles, scavenged power sources, and adapted with every setback, fueling my desire to create solutions." As he spoke, the environment shifted. The tension in the room began to dissipate, drawing them in, and he felt the collective consciousness beginning to awaken. Ethan found solace in that connection, a symbiotic energy flowing from his words into the audience. The upcoming demonstration became less about proving himself and more about sharing his journey and insights. This wasn't merely a performance. It was an invitation into his world. As he initiated the prototype, the lights flickered to life, illuminating the room with a warm, inviting glow. The crowd gasped, and Ethan could sense their collective disbelief morphing swiftly into excitement. Yet, a part of him was still haunted by what the manager might think. Was this just a temporary victory? Had he truly captured the essence of what it meant to innovate, or merely scratched the surface? Determined to deepen this narrative, Ethan looked up, his eyes scanning the faces watching him intently. "Every prototype comes with its own set of challenges. But I believe that with each failure we learn, and that learning becomes our foundation for success." His voice carried an undeniable fervor, and he saw the manager's brow shift slightly, perhaps a crack in the wall of skepticism. As he spoke, a haunting memory played at the edges of his consciousness, the days of sitting amidst scraps, tirelessly struggling to prove his worth, battling not only external doubt, but also the internal voices that told him he wasn't enough. Those moments had shaped him into this very instance, yet shadows loomed. He glanced at the manager, who now seemed somewhat intrigued. "What would you do if I told you my latest project is not just a business plan but a blueprint for an energy revolution?" Ethan challenged, his voice steady, yet inside, he felt his heart pound against the weight of expectation. The manager crossed his arms, a critical evaluation etched into his expression. "Then show me the financial viability. Show me how it stands against the market, against the giants." Doubt tightened its grip, but beneath it stirred determination. It would not only take innovation to impress the manager. It required navigating the labyrinth of business execution, financial management, and building a protective strategy against competition. "What if I could pull together the data, projections, and a market analysis within the next 2 weeks? Could we set up a formal presentation?" Ethan asked, feeling the immense weight of this task hang before him, yet a spark ignited within. The manager nodded slowly, weighing the commitment. "Fine. But know this, I'll be expecting results." As Ethan stepped back from the workbench, adrenaline coursed through him. His journey had only just begun, not just in proving himself to the manager, but in proving to himself what he was capable of achieving under pressure. It was a challenge he accepted, yet the shadow of what he had to face ahead loomed, thicker and heavier. He stared at the faint glow of his prototype as it hummed gently by his side. "Time and effort," he murmured, reminding himself of every late night spent working, every obstacle overcome. It's about more than just ideas. It's about execution and grit. For all his past struggles, he felt a dawning realization. Perhaps he was ready to rise, to lead, to innovate fully. The true test of his character awaited, and it was time to march forward, knowing that doubts were merely signposts on the road to success. But as he left the stage behind, he couldn't help but wonder, was the manager's expectation a seal of approval, or just the beginning of a steeper hill to climb? Would his ambition be enough to carry him through when deeper challenges emerged, hidden in the shadows of doubt? Ethan stepped away from the workbench, his mind racing with possibilities and plans. The challenge that loomed ahead felt monumental, but beneath the surface, his determination trembled like tightly coiled springs, ready to release energy. He had 2 weeks, just 14 days, to solidify a concept, weave together numbers, and create a compelling narrative that would not only satisfy the manager but also ignite passion in investors. As he made his way through the warehouse, the reality of the task ahead settled upon him like a heavy cloak. How does one transform an idea into a solid financial framework? He had a prototype that worked. Now he needed the data to back it up. The prospect of digging through market analysis, pricing strategies, and potential competitors felt daunting. Yet, as he journeyed further, doubt became interspersed with personal resolve. Ethan sat down in his small, disorganized office, clutter clinging to the edges of his desk. With a deep breath, he began to gather resources. He opened his laptop, the screen flickering to life as he navigated to business research sites. His days of absorbing information had amounted to this moment. He no longer needed to question his worth. He had a mountain to climb, and the summit was success. The data began to unfold before him, revealing trends, projections, and potential returns on investment. Each statistic carved a clearer path through the fog of uncertainty. He felt the initial flickers of excitement as he plotted graphs and roadmaps. This was not just numbers, it was his vision taking shape. But a gnawing skepticism tugged at his thoughts. What if the manager found holes in his strategy? What if the market analysis didn't align with their expectations? He couldn't afford uncertainty. This was the turning point he yearned for, not just in his career but in his identity. Success was no longer an abstract idea. It was a construct he was building piece by piece. In moments of silence, the images of his childhood flooded his mind. The memories of budgeting with his family, piecing together every bit of resource, now redefined his approach to business. With every failure they overcame, he understood the resilience one needed to create solutions out of scarcity. Those blueprints were etched in his psyche. As he reviewed competitors, Ethan felt themselves transform from mere statistics into respectable adversaries. They had resources he lacked, slick marketing strategies and extensive networks. Yet, behind the raw data lay an opportunity that he could seize. Nimbleness. In every crisis encountered, he could pivot, adapt, and create something innovative. Fueled with this newfound energy, he set short-term goals for himself. Over the next few days, he would reach out to industry experts, gather market reports, and refine his projections. He pushed himself to draft the presentation, mindful of the balance between technical data and compelling storytelling. Transformation wasn't just about the bottom line. It was about convincing others of the vision, of the potential impact. 2 sleepless nights later, enveloped in caffeine and ambition, Ethan emerged from the haze of numbers with a presentation that pulsed with energy. The slides were clean, each point aligned with not only facts but a narrative that encapsulated his journey and purpose. Yet, as he rehearsed in front of the mirror, the old shadows of doubt cropped up, whispering unsettling questions once more. What if the critics struck truly at his foundation? Would they see past the numbers and the presentation, diving into who he was? He remembered the manager's penetrating gaze, that air of authority that felt heavy yet exhilarating. The weight of expectation loomed large, but in a flash of insight, he recognized it was not merely pressure. It was a chance, an opening to seize part of the future he dreamed about all along. As he prepared to click through his slides again, a single thought surged forward with resolute clarity. Articulate, innovate, and execute. These were no longer mere words but guiding principles. Tomorrow would be the first step into a crucible of pitch meetings, questions, and choices. It would demand everything Ethan had learned in the quiet solitude of late nights and the echoes of his youth. Would he emerge with the approval he so desperately needed? He hesitated, one finger poised to click, aware that the journey had only begun. The true test of his resolve awaited, and with it came the excitement of potential aligned perfectly with the possibility of failure. In that moment, he understood the breadth of his own aspirations. The mountains, though daunting, were meant to be climbed. And in that realization, a deeper struggle loomed. Would he remain true to his core values during this relentless rise, or would the pressure alter his trajectory? The heart of the challenge thumped steadily ahead, compelling him to confront not just the manager but his very ideals. Would he rise against them or embrace the journey that made him whole? Ethan inhaled deeply as the day of reckoning arrived, the morning sun streaming through his office window, throwing shadows that danced across the cluttered desk. Each ray seemed to awaken a mix of anxiety and eagerness within him. Today wasn't just a presentation. It was the culmination of every doubt, every late-night calculation, and every hope he had clung to through this tumultuous phase. He glanced at the slides one last time, still vivid with the personal narrative he had crafted alongside the facts. Stepping into the conference room felt like entering a coliseum. The atmosphere was thick with expectation. Colleagues had gathered, the manager's presence looming like a statuesque sentinel at the front. Ethan fought the urge to retreat, absorbing the intensity of their scrutiny. He had prepared for this moment, yet as he locked eyes with his manager, a familiar wave of trepidation washed over him. Would he see the resolve in Ethan's presentation, or would he only perceive a mere novice grasping at straws? He started the presentation, the PowerPoint flickering into life. The first few slides flowed easily, grounded in data-driven insights that reflected his extensive research. He noted the slight shifts in posture among his audience, a head nod here, a raised eyebrow there. Each soundless affirmation encouraged him, coaxing out the quiet confidence embedded in his narrative. But then he approached the pivotal moment, the vision slide, where he would articulate not just numbers, but his soul's imprint on the project. With a steady voice, he laid out what the concept meant to him personally, tracing its roots back to his childhood experiences. He illustrated how resourcefulness had been a way of life, not merely an economic necessity, and how it shaped his view of innovation. Yet, as he spoke, he noticed the manager's expression harden. Doubt flickered in the sharp lines of his face. Ethan's heart raced. Was he reaching his audience, or was he overwhelmed by his own journey? The questions swirling in his mind began to drown out his carefully prepared words. Ethan, the manager, interjected sharply. What makes you believe this vision can compete against more established players? Passion is commendable, but need I remind you that success in this industry requires more than just enthusiasm? Ethan felt every eye shift to him, scrutinizing the weakness beneath his bravado. What if this was a defining moment not just professionally but personally? Could he confront the questioning gaze of authority without sacrificing his vision? Because the industry needs change, Ethan responded, his voice clarifying through the murmurings of self-doubt. Innovation stems from understanding not just the market's demands but human experiences. I've lived the tension between scarcity and creativity. This is not just a project to me, it's an opportunity to reshape possibilities. It's where practicality meets passion. The words hung in the air as silence enveloped the room. Each heartbeat pounded in his ears, carrying the weight of vulnerability. For the first time, he was not merely presenting. He was asserting himself. He could see the manager's defenses momentarily soften, as if his argument had struck a chord. Yet, Ethan knew he had not escaped entirely. The battle was far from over. There was still the risk of rejection, the crushing no that could come at any moment. He was walking a tightrope, balancing his authenticity against the harsh realities of competitive scrutiny. But in that moment of precariousness, he also discovered resilience within himself. The lingering fear didn't dissolve, yet it became a companion rather than an adversary. He realized that striving towards his ambitions didn't mean eliminating uncertainty but embracing it, wearing it like armor. As he concluded his presentation, the room erupted into murmurs. Some were cautious while others leaned in, intrigued. He had captured their attention, a difficult feat in a corporate world ingrained with skepticism. Ethan left the room feeling both exhilarated and drained. Fleeting sense of triumph igniting a flicker of hope. But what if the feedback was collated around the old paradigms, dismissing his approach before it ever had the chance to unfurl fully? Would he be able to withstand the storm of critique, or let this be the turning point towards greater authenticity? He could sense the tension crackling in the air, aware that the next phase would not merely be about ideas, but the grappling match against preconceived notions that threatened to crush his spirit. Would he find the strength to advocate for his beliefs amidst the clamor of conventionality, or would he bow to the pressures of conformity? The complexity of his situation weighed heavily as he stepped away from the conference room. The real challenge awaited navigating through the responses, understanding how to respond, adapt, and potentially reframe not just his project but the narrative of who he was becoming in this unforgiving landscape. The days that followed the presentation felt both exhilarating and suffocating. Ethan returned to his desk each morning with a pulse of hope, yet weighed down by an unrelenting uncertainty. Each time he opened his email, he braced himself for feedback, affirmation or rejection colliding in his mind like two opposing winds. As he worked, he glanced around the office, observing colleagues buried in their routines, their conversations swirling like background noise. He wondered if they struggled with their convictions as he did, or if they found solace in the safety of conformity. The very thought ignited a defiance deep within him. Was he brave or foolish to seek a path so divergent from the status quo? When the email arrived, there was no fanfare. It was succinct, almost mechanical. A series of praises interspersed with cautionary notes from the manager echoed through the words. "Your passion is commendable," it began, but Ethan's heart sank as he progressed to the critiques that followed. Concerns about feasibility, market analysis, the necessity of aligning with established standards. Each point chipped away at the fragile confidence he had momentarily gained. Ethan stared blankly at his screen, the relentless weight of doubt pressing down harder than before. Had he overstepped? Was his personal story enough to carry the weight of a proposal in such a rigid environment? It was time to confront his fears, to carve clarity out of the noise that threatened to swallow him whole. He decided to schedule a follow-up meeting with his manager. As he prepared, he realized that this would not merely be a tactical encounter. It would require the very core of his convictions. He sat at his desk, scribbling notes, thoughts tumbling together as he worked out counterpoints and solutions. The act of articulating them helped solidify his understanding, his belief that innovation was not synonymous with recklessness, but rather an intentional push against the constraints of complacency. On the day of the meeting, Ethan felt both invigorated and petrified. As he entered the office, the familiar tension of expectation felt different. It was palpable, yet he also sensed an opportunity. He squared his shoulders, breathing deep as he knocked on the door, coming face to face with the realities of his thoughts. "Ethan, come in. Let us get started." The manager beckoned with an air of neutrality, but Ethan found a flicker of anticipation behind those words. With fresh statistics in hand, Ethan articulated his vision with newfound clarity, turning criticism into a springboard for dialogue. "I respect the need for established metrics, but consider this. The disruption in our field directly correlates with stagnation. Our competitors treat this as a cash cow, but we have the chance to redefine value. The customers don't only buy products. They buy into a narrative. Let us make ours compelling." The manager leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a posture of both engagement and skepticism. Ethan pressed on, articulating how his approach could not only align with market demands, but also make a bold statement that would stir emotions, tapping into a market eager for authenticity. He watched as the manager's initial reticence began to ebb, intrigue taking its place. Yet just as a note of accord seemed on the horizon, the manager questioned, "What if this gamble doesn't pay off? What's the plan if things go south?" Ethan hesitated. The fear of failure whispered its familiar tune, igniting old insecurities. But in that moment of vulnerability, he felt the weight of his journey, all the struggles that had shaped him. This confrontation wasn't just professional. It was personal. "Then we own it," he replied, his voice steady. "But we can't avoid the risk of innovation. Every great success is born from confronting the potential for failure." The atmosphere thickened with charged silence as Ethan searched for cues in the manager's expression. A battle of wills unfolding. The answer hung in the air, one that could lead to acceptance or dismissal. He sensed a pivotal shift. occurring, one that echoed the battle within himself. Perhaps this was not about winning approval but about standing firm in his beliefs. As the meeting drew to a close, there was still no clear resolution, yet Ethan felt a small surge of momentum. Something had changed inside him. The uncertainty that used to gnaw at his confidence now flickered like a beacon. Navigating this pathway of professional complexities demanded courage beyond typical ambition. It required a reckoning with his own essence. What if this was a turning point not just for his project, but for how he viewed himself within this world? Ethan left the meeting room with lingering questions simmering in his mind. The journey was far from over. The stakes had escalated. Would he ascend further into the realms of authenticity, or would fear creep in again to tether him to the familiar? The pulse of uncertainty still throbbed, yet it became a catalyst. How would he confront the potential fallout if his approach didn't align with conventional thought? And more importantly, could he sustain this momentum against the skepticism that lay ahead? The tighter the grip this uncertainty held, the deeper his resolve crystallized. It was time to face the consequences of creation. What awaited next would not merely be about outcomes, but the very essence of Ethan's ability to weather the storms between personal belief and professional expectations. Confrontation loomed on the horizon, and he braced himself. The real test was just beginning. Ethan stood at the threshold of his future, where differently colored possibilities converged, and the faint breeze of change filled the air. The past few weeks had been an exquisite roller coaster, each rise and fall deepening his understanding of himself not just as an inventor, but as a burgeoning leader. His recent meeting had unfolded into a more nuanced exchange than he had anticipated, illuminating unexpected pathways he could tread on his way to success. Recalling the manager's initial skepticism, Ethan leaned into the lessons gleaned from their confrontation. He had not just defended his proposal, he had crafted a narrative that resonated beyond the boardroom. This process taught him that to lead meant forging connections with both the audience and the monumental objective he envisioned. He embraced that understanding and called back the courage that had flickered within him amidst that sterile conference room. Determined to solidify his position, he immersed himself in further research. Each statistic reinforced his commitment to innovation, a commitment he could now articulate with solid evidence. The data he unearthed pointed towards an unequivocal need for change in the market. Opportunities existed for those willing to reshape their narratives, making Ethan ever more determined to communicate his vision with clarity and conviction. In the following days, he gathered feedback from trusted peers. He transformed their insights into actionable steps, tweaking his business model until it exuded viability. He reached out to potential investors, weaving in elements of social entrepreneurship into his pitch. After all, it was about more than mere numbers, it was about democratizing access to innovation. He scheduled meetings and prepared for presentations, practicing his narratives until they felt effortless. Just as his newfound routine started to bear fruit, Ethan received an invitation to present at a regional pitch competition. It felt like the perfect platform to display both his prototypes and the refined strategy he had nurtured. A blend of electrifying excitement and gut-wrenching fear surged within him. Could he withstand the scrutiny of a larger audience? But he understood that this opportunity was more than just a stage. It was a stepping stone toward a vision he now firmly owned. Leading up to the competition, Ethan devoted hours to crafting a presentation that showcased not only his inventions, but the story woven through each prototype. Here, he drew again from his upbringing the motivation behind his designs, the shadows of judgment he had fought against, and how his journey shaped each innovation. Each draft refined his capacity to translate concepts into narratives that resonated, and each rehearsal fostered a camaraderie with his own voice, an element he had once feared. When the day of the pitch competition arrived, Ethan's heart raced. As he took the stage, he stood before an audience of innovators, investors, and critics, each potential gatekeeper holding his future in their hands. The weight of expectation was palpable, but unlike before, it filled him with resolve rather than paralysis. "Thank you for this opportunity," he began, grounding himself through a steady breath. "I am here not only to share my innovations but to connect our lived experiences with imaginative solutions." He felt the energy ripple through the crowd, curiosity peaking as he articulated the narrative behind each device, linking back to the very essence of who he was. The room captured each word, the air thick with attention. As he reached the climax of his pitch, he invited them to visualize the possibilities that lay ahead. Technology should not be blissfully out of reach, it should illuminate pathways for every community. He concluded with bold, unyielding confidence, inviting questions. As inquiries flowed in, he found satisfaction in addressing concerns, seamlessly navigating each interrogative. It was as though the culmination of hard work, late nights, and personal growth poured into every response. Investors probed, but, rather than shy away, he welcomed their curiosity, using it to clarify his vision further. When the judges finally announced the winners, his heart thudded within his chest. The anticipation hung thick, but instead of feeling fragile, he stood grounded in the belief that even the journey alone had reshaped his understanding of success. Recognition was no longer just an external validation, it was rooted within his sense of self. And then it happened. The name Ethan echoed through the room as the people erupted into applause. A symphony of recognition that encompassed not just his inventions, but his entire journey. It was proof that he belonged not just to this elite space, but to the world of innovation itself. In that triumphant moment, Ethan felt layers of doubt peel away. He had captured not just a title, but a sense of belonging alongside skillful recognition of his growth. His narrative had taken flight, and in doing so, he had rewritten not just his destiny but reclaimed his identity from the shadows of expectation. Ethan left that hall not just as a victor of a competition, but as a transformed individual, a testament that he was more than a product of his upbringing. He had conquered the cynicism he once felt defined him and claimed a space where ambition and capability met. With bold resolve, he strove onward, ready to embrace new challenges, driven by innovation and perseverance. This was not the end. It was merely the beginning of a larger narrative, the story he intended to write with grit, determination, and every ounce of ingenuity he possessed. A future liberated by his own definitions, bound by unyielding purpose, set against the backdrop of a world awaiting change. Now is the time for you to mark this transformative journey. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that ignite passion and potential. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support insight into personal growth. Comment your reactions and theories about Ethan's incredible conclusion, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this empowering finale. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of overcoming challenges understand the importance of supporting this channel through these actions.